40, so very good. You know, older calibers would probably need more frequent servicing. Modern 2024 era calibers, like our watches here, are not nearly need so much attention. So every 5 years, you bring your watch back here, and our watchmakers, you've got Art there and Kieran, will disassemble the watch, disassemble the mechanism into every single component piece. So this is, you guys in the business, you know what this is?
What do you call that, base plate?
Well, no, the entire thing.
The mechanism.
The mechanism.
The movement.
Yeah. Do you know which caliber it is? So Sleece 200. So this is a very, very standard example of what mechanical watch movement looks like in 2024. There you go, pass that around. Most of our watches are based on that mechanism. A lot of watches that are being sold at £3,500, £4,000 will use that as a kind of a base caliber. A Tudor, a little bit of an exception. Oris use Solitas and their own mechanisms. Tag Heuer use Solitas. Longines would use versions of that sort of mechanism. It's easy to work on. The parts are easily accessible. It's relatively cheap to maintain, and you can achieve a very good level of accuracy with that. I could regulate that to 2 seconds a day if I wanted to. And it's very well designed. There's some mechanical watch movements out there that are somewhat obtusely designed in terms of the way that they're put together, but that is pretty much like you just take it apart and you put it back in together in the same way. So you'll disassemble the entire thing. So we have our mainspring here. So all mechanical watches, we'll have a spring like this. This is the power source. Some movements may have longer springs, some may have shorter, some may have thicker. Some movements will have 2 mainsprings because they have 2 barrels in them. That's what a very standard kind of looking mainspring looks like. And all the power that drives these mechanical watches comes from coiling that spring and then it unwinding over a long period of time. There you go. The mainspring lives inside this barrel. So you are coiling that entire, I don't know, how long is it? A couple of feet long maybe, material into our barrel here, which you can pass around. When you service the mechanism, you'll take the mainspring out, you'll clean it, you'll clean the barrel arbor around which the mainspring kind of turns, and then you'll refit it. When you change mainsprings, which is maybe once every 10 years, you just change the entire barrel. When you take the barrel that exists, throw it away, you'll fit in another one. And then you have all the other components as well from, you've got our 4th wheel here. So with a mechanical watch with a second hand, the second hand sits on the 4th wheel, right on the tip there. If you wear your watch all day long, this second hand, or the 4th wheel, will be turning once a minute for 5 years. So this part moves most frequently, so it will wear out the quickest, essentially. So you can pass that around. And then you have things that don't wear out at all. Thank you. Thank you. A screw like this. This is a bridge screw, a blued bridge screw, which I'll give to this gentleman to pass around. There you go. So a blued bridge screw like that is not mechanical. It just holds things in place. You may never change a screw like that unless you lose it or you scratch it or you damage it or whatever it happens to be.
There's almost no wear and tear.
On the screw, basically none. I mean, it just sits there, right? Where, mechanical moving things, eventually wear out. Like this is our second wheel. So the second wheel, you go from the barrel to the second wheel, that will wear out incredibly slowly. So broadly speaking, the faster it turns, the more frequently it turns, the more often you're going to have to change it, which makes sense.
So on a 5-year service,
yeah,
is there a standard service parts you will replace on every 5-year service?
It's going to be based on inspection, essentially. There's a standard price.
Yep.
So to service this movement, it's going to be about £375. To service a chronograph, it's going to be about £450. And for that, you get a day of Art's time to actually disassemble the mechanism and then reassemble it.
It's just a long waiting list at the moment, isn't it?
It takes about 3 months is in watchmaking. It's not long. No. But to customers,
it's a long time.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. You know, it's no good me saying, well, actually, for other brands, it's longer, because as far as you're concerned, it's still 3 months without your watch. But it is relatively quick. So, but obviously, we want to bring that service interval down to be as brief as possible, which is why we're investing in training more watchmakers and training more watch assemblers to actually make our products.
Is it possible to actually book it in so instead of sending the watch in and waiting 3 months for it to get to the front of the queue, is it possible to book it in and say, right, get your watch here on this date, like taking your car in for a service, you book it in and for a slot of time?
Nothing is impossible. You know, I've had people suggest exactly the same thing to me several times. There's no reason you couldn't do that. They're just logistical issues with actually making that happen. What if you can't make it that day? Do you wait another 3 months? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I'm talking about, you book it in and like a 2 or 3 week window, you get it here for that date, you will have it back for that date.
There's, at the moment, that's not the way it works, and I don't think any watch brand does it like that. There's no reason you couldn't. It's just, as I said, the actual logistics of arranging that. And then, anyway, if your watch needs servicing, why do you need to keep it?
Yeah, but if it's working fine, but you want to get it serviced every 5 years.
No, I absolutely appreciate where people come from.
Book the service in now for 5 years' time.
Would you pay a premium for that service?
Probably would, yes.
How much?
Here we go.
Probably 10-15% on top of the service cost.
What's that?
Say 50 quid.
50
quid on top just to book it in.
Might have to make it a little bit richer than that. There's no reason you can't do things, but at the moment,
Why would a service like that require premium?
it wouldn't necessarily require it. People could just pay extra for the convenience. You know, when you order clothes off of Marks and Spencer's, you have the normal delivery, or you could pay extra to get it the next day. It's that sort of thing. So it wouldn't require it. You're just charging people for a high level of service if they want it done in that way. You see what I mean?
Yeah, but my profession is service designer.
Right.
Right. So I don't actually see what the downside is to you guys to this suggestion.
No, absolutely.
In fact, instead of sitting on, I don't know, dozens of watches of other people and having to store them somewhere, look after them, etc., you would have handful of watches to service that go through. Now, if people miss their dates to drop their watches off, they basically lose the deposit or lose the spot.
There are all sorts of things that could be done. I just do the tours, guys.
It's just interesting that you jumped. It's like, how much would you pay extra for that? And it was like,
you could.
The flip side of that is like, how cheaper could that service be offered by Bremont?
As I said, there are all sorts of things you can do as a brand, and it's not up to me. If you make a compelling business case for it to do it that way, but then there's the logistics.
It's just when you got a 6-7 grand watch, you don't want to be without it.
Totally understand, and there are people with £400,000 resale meals that have the exact same thing. Kuba, who works for us, he's on Christmas now. It looks like he used to service resale meals in Dubai. And with them, if a part was broken, a new one would need to be made in Switzerland. That takes months. Well, it would take however long it takes. So, all sorts of things you could do. At the moment, this is just the way. This is the way it works, and the way it works across the industry. That's not a reason not to do anything, but essentially that's the way it is at the moment. But people have suggested this to me on multiple occasions, and I've always tried to acknowledge, that'd be great, if you can actually make it work. But at the moment, so at the moment, 12 weeks to do so, and then you get a 2 year guarantee on the work, and then you're good for another good for another 5 years. So £375 every 1,500 days, or whatever it is, 1,600 days.
It's not a lot per day.
No, pennies per day. Right. Some brands mechanically lengthen their service intervals by lowering the beat rate of the watches and all those other sorts of things. There are ways that you could extend this kind of stuff. But at the moment, this is the way that we run it. I mentioned the tourbillon movement. So Trudy builds the tourbillon movement. Trudy's just sitting there. So that was initial run of 30 watches. So that tourbillon mechanism is assembled by us. And then the Siddiqui ones as well were built by us. And don't actually have an example of a tourbillon here, but it's the most complicated watch that we make.
So is it in-house tourbillon?
No, it's built by us, and the watch is built by us in-house, but it's designed by a external movement designer called Olivier Maury.
From?
He is French, I believe. I don't know the name of his company. Skill. There you go.
That's his own brand.
Yeah. So that's what it says on the
He
tin.
was a
Skill.
watchmaker.
So and that movement is used in other brands, in other watches as well. So no, the idea of actually manufacturing a tourbillon mechanism and assembling it ourselves is far beyond Bremont's capabilities after 22 years. So. And we're only doing a limited edition number of them, so it wouldn't make sense to invest in the manufacturing capabilities just for 30 watches or whatever. So that's why. But it's interesting. The tourbillon is interesting because it's the first series manufactured, mass-produced tourbillon wristwatch to be made in this country ever. Probably, and when I say mass-produced, I am meaning like 30 pieces on scale. Scale is relative, but that's the first time it's been done for a long time. Sure, George Daniels did tourbillon wristwatches, but not 30 of them. You know what I mean? Or Roger Smith. So that's what it represents for us. So this is what a mechanical Calibre looks like in 2024. If you go back in time, 300 years, you're looking at something like this. This is where I get my glove out. So this is a pocket watch that's made by George Graham. In the middle of the 18th century, George Graham was knocking around. You guys know who George Graham is? George Graham is probably one of the biggest, most famous names in English clockmaking, watchmaking. He was a contemporary of John Harrison and Thomas Mudge. And this is an example of one of his pieces. So this is the 5,939th mechanism that he made, and I know that because it says so on the main plate there. Every single part was manufactured by hand in the middle of the 18th century. All the decoration was applied by hand. You have our little balance bridge and our balance assembly here. Got a little balance wheel, which if you look from the side is that little steel wheel. I'll kind of bring it around for you guys to look at. So that little steel thing there, that's the balance wheel. And it still moves.
Oh, right.
If I kind of zhuzh it like that, you can see it's still moving. The balance wheel is sitting in a diamond jewel bearing, which is right in the middle there. And the diamond jewel bearing is sitting inside a sapphire cabochon. And that sapphire cabochon is held in place by two tiny little screws, which would have been made by tiny little borrowers back in the 18th century, right? And then you have exactly the same with a mechanical, modern Calibre. You have our mainspring, which sits in our barrel there. And the mainspring is wound by a fusee and chain. This is the fusee chain. And then you have a conical kind of wheel here, which is the fusee itself. And a fusee is essentially an obsolete form of watchmaking technology designed at a time when the materials that mainsprings were made from were a lot less sophisticated than they are today. So this would sit in a gold hunter case or half hunter case, so it would be a big thing. You would flip the front open and you'd have a little key, and the key would be used to set the time and the date. And then the opposite side of the key, you'd have like a winding pinion essentially, and that would be used to wind the watch here on that little, that little post there, beg your pardon. No, this little post, which turns the fusee, which winds the mainspring inside the barrel. And this, if you were a gentleman in the position to purchase one of these mechanisms in the middle of the 18th century, your name was Viscount Bridgerton, and you didn't have a job. And you didn't need to be going to work or on time for anything, really. Exactly the same, in the same way that people are buying watches today to show off their wealth, their class, their status, their ability to get certain pieces. The guy in the 18th century was buying this watch for exactly the same reason. Being able to commission a product like this from one of the preeminent names in watchmaking at the time would have been a big, big, big deal. And it would have been accurate. I mean, the idea of being seconds accurate with this sort of thing was just not even a thing. This may have been accurate to like minutes a day, tens of minutes a day, but he was not trying to call New York or whatever it is for a Zoom call or whatever it is. You just basically vaguely need to know what sort of time it was. And maybe every day he would set his portable clock by his grandfather clock in his house, which would have been more accurate. Or if he's out and about in the ton, there was a lady in Greenwich, and she had a very, very accurate pocket watch, and you would essentially buy the time from her. So you'd go up to her, tap your Oyster card, and she would tell you the time, and then you'd set your clock by hers. And the reason I know that is because it's a fact from QI, and QI never lies. Stephen Fry said it. It might have been 19th century, but you would have someone basically selling the time to you, and it'd be like a penny or something like that. So
time is really money.
Time literally was money at that time. Time isn't really money, nowadays. If you really want to be on time for things, you're looking at your phone or whatever. Mechanical watches are more about telling the time. Nowadays they are collector's items. People, broadly speaking, buy watches. I'm just going to scooch this open. People buy watches nowadays to celebrate life milestones, right? Your birthday or Christmas. Birth of your first child, wedding, your anniversary. Yeah. That's how most people buy
Wife's
watches.
Birthday.
Pardon? Wife's birthday. Yeah, absolutely. And you buy yourself a watch for your wife's birthday just to celebrate.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's an excuse to buy 2 watches at least. But
and then you do get people who buy watches for fun. But most people, £4,000, £5,000, they save up. They think very, very hard about their purchase, and then that is the watch that they buy and they wear forever. And it might be their only watch. And then you get people who multiples, like imagine we got multiples, I got multiples. And then you have people who have hundreds and hundreds of watches, but a very, very small group of people. But it's the people who just buy one watch forever that Bremont is trying to cater to. And they are kind of the hardest to sell to because they're only buying one. With the collectors, they'll eventually get around to Bremont. If for some reason it'll be a historical imposition or to get a British brand in their collection or whatever, it's the people on the high street that will buy one watch for their 40th birthday that Bremont is trying to sell to.
Way more competitive.
Way more competitive, much harder. And economically speaking, the people who have £4,000 to spend on watches have a lot more choice, and they actually have a lot less money to be spending. They're being squeezed, electricity prices, mortgage prices, all those sorts of things. So that purchase is becoming even more considered. Yeah. Whereas people buying £500 watches, people who are buying £100,000 watches, they're not impacted by the price of electricity. They're not looking at Octopus going, how am I going to? They're like, is it going to be the Patek this week, or is it going to be, whatever? So at our price bracket, as you said, it's becoming increasingly competitive. And brands have to work harder and harder and harder to offer a compelling product, and that's what Bremont is trying to do. And we've done it for years based on the English-made thing, the British company, the historical limited editions. Eventually, you have to sell a product to people who don't care about the fact that it's made in this country, who don't care about the historical limited editions. They're trying to buy something that's expensive and that feels like premium. Feels premium, but it also feels like an event. Which is why we work very, very hard in the boutique to give people, the experience. Yeah, absolutely. You will get people who buy watches online and it just turns up on their door, but for certain brands, you cannot do that with that product. You can't just go on Patek Philippe, £100,000, whatever it is, just turns up your door. You have to go to a boutique and they will treat you in a certain way, and the whole experience of buying that product is kind of what you're buying into. And with Bremont, at our boutiques, we try and do the same thing. We've only been selling watches online since 2019 or something like that, so not very long at all. Are there any questions about the service centre before we head downstairs?
Facilities.
Yes, we will go via that way. So down the stairs, please. Thank you very much.
After you, Chase.